Hello, Mo Phillips here. Excited that you're here to enjoy this conversation I had with my friend Mike Crenshaw. Mike is one of Oregon's preeminent MCs, but he's not just an MC. He's a poet and an artist and an activist and an educator and all-around champion of justice and purveyor of truth. He's involved in so many organizations, notably Education Without Borders, that has done ridiculous work in Burundi and Africa. On the national scale, he's done heaps for all kinds. That's just too many to name. He was a national finalist in the poetry slam after he won the Portland Poetry Slam. He's does teaching artistry and teaches kids about hip hop and all kinds. I can't even with the amount of things that Mike Crenshaw gets up to. I'm excited for you to hear us really dig deep into the Oregon State song. There's one thing that Mike Crenshaw does not do, and that is pull punches. So experience the realness and the truth that is Mike Crenshaw. I'm glad you're here. Dig in. Mike Crenshaw.
Mo Phillips.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
You look relaxed. Is that fair?
It's true, man.
Rocking chair.
It's funny. Like I can tell when I look at myself in the mirror on camera, what phase of getting to where I'm trying to be is in terms of how relaxed. So I'm getting there.
I should actually properly start this interview by requesting that you now sing the Oregon State song.
Don't know that shit. Can't do it. Looked at a video of it and had an interest. Whenever. So here's a question, and this is good in the context of what we're talking about. When people say fair, what the fuck do they really mean? Does fair mean white? Is fair another word for white? Because
I think so. Yes.
I think so too, right? Fair skinned. And yes. When you see it used in so many cultural artifacts from a certain time period, you have to wonder, well, what's the difference between this and the Screwdriver song?
Tell me about the Screwdriver song.
Well, so Screwdriver is world famous. They're the most famous white power skinhead band. They got songs like "Nigger, Nigger, Get on the Boat," "Nigger, Nigger, Row, Row," "White Power for England," and all this stuff. And like,
oh my goodness,
it really set into motion. This hardcore white power rock music thing that's been popular since probably the late 70s, emerging through the 80s, 90s. And now there's like underground websites and movements.
Right.
These bands will play white power rallies all over the world, in support of racial terror. So like, take that. And I see a direct parallel between what often gets looked at as this errant, like underground movement based in brutality, and this like kind of like mainstream acceptance of genocide and Western expansion as a point of pride and orientation.
Which is
what that song is.
That song has all of that. It has the conquering, it has the martyrs.
The blood of martyrs, bless the land.
It's hot garbage. It's such a mess.
It could be like a white power black metal song, right?
Oh, fully, no problem. Yeah, and so it's interesting too because like the legislation clearly sees that this we gotta rectify this situation, which
right.
Long time coming, but glad it came anyways. So then that leads us into this process of a number of things. How do we replace it and all that? But I want to pull back from that first, sure. and even question why we have this. Like, why do we have a state song? Like, what's the point? And what's the power of a song? So, like, can you speak on that? Like, why would we even want a state song, or what is the point? Like, what's that for?
I'm gonna look this up too as a point of reference while we're talking.
Yeah, for sure.
When I refer to it, I want to be on point. But Mo, have you ever heard of the 14 words? So 14 words is a reference to the most popular white supremacist slogan in the world. We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. So I'm gonna just put that in the chat so you have a copy of it.
Thank you.
Now, the reason I think it's important to look at that is that's generally when we talk about Western expansion and manifest destiny, the process of creating a state and claiming land for oneself while simultaneously committing acts of genocide against First People. This is what we're talking about. And we have to stop acting like this isn't central to everything. And when I think about why a state would have a song, I'm thinking about, well, why does, why do high school football teams have chants, right? Why do any cultural organization, a fraternal organization, a gang, a club, they have chants that represent the spirit and the energy of what their purpose is. And so I think the Oregon State song is really just a manifesto about like expansion and domination. And we most of us in America have been trained to think and conditioned to think about these things as a matter of safety and stability and comfort. But at what expense? And that's what we don't really talk about.
Yeah. It's illuminating how much of it's steeped in fear. Like it's such a closed view of the world, and it seems so fearful of the world that it always shocks me that it manifests as power, because it's like anything but. It's all they're all terrified. But that's, I mean, I digress. But I'm fascinated by the fear that is inherent with supremacy.
I don't think I don't see. To me, it's not digression. To me, this is the kind of shit that's kept me up and inspired me all my life. It's like looking at these things because I've had to face them, and I've had to, have these concerns that were pounded into my head first by my parents who wanted me to get home safe, and then by the environment and the neighborhood and the school and the institution and the society I lived in, which is like, stay in your place or you will not survive. And so these things are normal, and we treat talking about them in a critical way as if it's problematic. And there's a reason for that. And
right.
These things are further in our awareness because of where we're at as a society, which is a product of the history. So when George Floyd and everything else that happened around that period, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, went up, and that directly contributed to 150 days of protests where in the whitest city in America, everybody's in the street, not just Black folks. And then we have sub issues around that of like people, grappling with these concerns of, well, is this really a Black-led movement, and what's it mean if most of the people are white? And the fact that we're even talking about that shit shows us that it's something we have to face.
Right. Now I want to talk like process. Okay, so
how do we do
we
this?
know how we want, or how people might do it, but I want to know how Mike Crenshaw would do it. Like, what would you even do? Where would you start? I mean, you can talk to me too about how you start just in general on any piece of art that you make. But then I'm also curious, like, how would you even approach a song about Oregon? Like, because it's rife with some shit,
No, that's a really fascinating question, right? And it almost quickly becomes overwhelming in my imagination, right? Because there's an individual practice and process of like how Mike goes about writing songs. I will either start with a feeling or a series of thoughts or a single thought that seems impactful or profound, and then figure out words to express it. Or I will hear words expressed. Sometimes things happen, like I'll be listening to a podcast, but I'll actually not hear exactly what they said. But before I rewind to verify what was actually said, I realized that what they said sounded like something else.
Right.
And
Yes.
what it sounded like might be like a spark. Like, what if somebody rhymed what I thought they said with what they did say? There's things like that, right? So that's just in the lyrical, intellectual side of things. And then for music, being a rapper and a poet and an MC is rhythm. You know, I work with a lot of rhythm, percussion, bass, drums, and those are the building blocks that can force words to appear in my imagination, that sometimes takes shape in a way that feels almost autonomous from like my conscious self, and then I figure out how to connect those things to more intentional forms of sentences and bars and so forth. Now, going from that individual process world to engaging a whole state full of like millions of people, right?
Right, dude.
What do you do?
What do you do?
And if to be fair, I don't want to recreate exclusive process.
No.
If we're talking about inclusion, it's going to be more than my perspective at the table. So we then I would have to think about how do we form a committee that is representative of inclusivity. How do we get as many people as we imagine need to be at the table? How do we vet that process so that it's accountable to the community, so that as the process moves forward, we're not lacking integrity?
Yeah.
And that's not something that's just that part alone is not something that happens quickly. If you're going to do it well. So I'm thinking that this would have to take place on a timeline. And that means labor, that means organization, that means resources like money to pay for the people to focus, to keep the ball rolling in a way that this thing just doesn't dissipate and people get burn out or lose interest or stop focusing on it. You know, how many different native ethnicities are in the state alone? Okay.
Right. How many languages?
I'm thinking about, and then come to the metro area, I'm thinking about just, and this is just based on assumptions of me being able to identify people based on what I think I know, right? About different migrant communities. I see East African, West African, Central African people. I see people from Belarus and Russia and Romania. I see, come on.
Hmong, Laotian, Cambodian,
every Latin American country.
All of them.
Yeah.
Totally. So how do we cover that? I mean, it seems an impossible task, but clearly someone can speak on what it feels like to be an Oregonian.
That's right.
And so what is that?
That's so maybe, and I don't know how much Crystal's already thought out because she's sharp and we haven't talked as much as we should or as much as I'd like to. But I think cultural organizations that represent groups of people from geographic land masses, right? So, you know, Asia is a huge continent, right? There's Middle Eastern ethnic people, there's South Asian, there's East Asia, there's Southeast Asia. Are there organizations in town that represent all those people in the constituency? Can those organizations be the places where we would do outreach and say, this is what we're trying to accomplish? Can there be a process to engage a constituency around what it means for people to be an Oregonian? And then how do you narrow that down to, because I'm also thinking about performance, writing, recording, and performance. So if potentially hundreds of people can contribute content that's crafted in the lyrics, is that the job of a handful of people? And is the recording done and is it performed by a group of people or by a few individuals?
Right. Yeah, great questions, all of them. Not that melody hasn't been in hip hop for ages, but like from my own limited experience with hip hop, like there's a lot more melody seeping into choruses right now of hip hop. Is that a fair assessment? Like that's
It comes and goes in waves,
it
and
comes in waves, right?
because when I was listening to you talk about the different versions, it made me think immediately of hip hop and dance hall, and how in hip hop and dance hall, especially in prior decades, it was more popular in hip hop, but it's remained popular in dance hall. There will be what they call a rhythm, and
Right.
the rhythm or the beat, right? And
Mm.
there will be potentially hundreds of versions of different artists doing their lyrics on that same rhythm.
Right.
And there can be hallmarks of where there's similarities between the chorus that stay universal and consistent.
Yeah.
But the verses are different for depending on the, and so I like that idea. And then of course, yeah, some type of melodic chorus that everybody who did it would do some version of that.
Yeah, right.
That would
Something.
be sick.
It would be really cool. And that's that's that kind of community bonding too. Like I was I attended this Oregon Humanities Zoom thing last night. And it was mainly about tribalism and how we kind of have at least a conversation between tribes. And that's something that came up also with Kim Stafford, and when I was talking with him earlier, he called it the cedar and the sage, right? The cedar side of Oregon and the sage side of Oregon. And how can making a state song as a state, as a huge community, what is the possibility of a state song to at least start that conversation?
That's important, and I think the idea of cedar and sage is brilliant.
Isn't that cool?
I'd never heard that before.
Me neither. I was blown away.
Well, and because it deals with, objectivity is false in a lot of ways, but in this way, it does deal with these objective facts of land and features of the land that everybody is familiar with. If we haven't experienced them subjectively ourselves, like there's probably people in the sage part of the state that have never come to Portland.
Sure.
That's just the way it is.
Sure.
But they can tell you something about what's common to their experience from where they're at. Totally. So that things like that could be uniting features that, if we're engaging from the level of things that aren't culturally specific, but maybe more geographically specific, does that help?
Right. No, I think is that our only common denominator? Is that we have some geographic connection? Because our cultures are very real different, man.
Yeah.
And even between you and I, and I know that you and I share a lot of political leanings, but obviously our cultures are we have very different backgrounds.
And we're two urban people too, so I couldn't tell you the first thing about what's going on out there.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And even when I go to visit libraries in Monmouth and Amity, in tiny towns, generally in the valley. I mean, sometimes I get out into the sage, but even then, I mean, I don't feel lost, but I definitely feel out of place. Yeah. I had a show. Where was that? I think it was in Staten, probably 2016, maybe 2017 in the summer. And a guy came in a MAGA hat, and I was immediately, I was on edge. Just because I was like, man, this guy is out to get people. This guy is not. If you're wearing that hat, you're saying something about how you feel about the rest of the world, and I'm not down with that. So that part's tricky when we're trying to make connection. If we, if we feel threatened and feel uncomfortable with people, it's hard.
And it is, when you're dealing with things of this scale, it is your responsibility. It becomes our responsibility to consider things that might be beyond our own worldview. I think as artists that have a political consciousness, it is easier for us to say people need to come together. Because we see the value of the humanity that is diverse, right? Because we're
Mhm.
constantly in situations where we're engaging audiences that might not be people like us, you know? And
Right.
but the actual work of doing that is something different than most people actually do.
Yeah, definitely.
We're in our comfort zones most of our lives in
Mm.
terms of when we're not at work or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's a curious thing because I also I guess part of what's helping me think about this is just looking at the way people fall apart online and are at each other's throats. And
Hmm.
anytime, there's these obvious polls, like one would be MAGA people and one would be Black Lives Matter people, right?
Right. Obvious
So
polls.
we could assume that if our project appears to favor one side of that poll, then people on the other side are going to be like, hey, you can't do it that way.
Right. And so then that brings us back to like, is the only thing that connects us the fact that we live in these geographic boundaries and geologic? We can talk about volcanoes and the cedar and the sage, and those kinds of things. And there's poetic, a lot of poetic license in that actually can address some of those differences by saying, I mean, immediately you knew what Kim was talking about when I mentioned cedar and sage. Like there's way we're poets, we're lyricists. There's ways for us to mask all this, but the funny thing is it's not our job.
Yeah,
We're actually giving this to the people and seeing what the
right,
people do
right.
with it, which is in it's, as an artist for me, it's like, well, dude, I got this. It's fine. Just let me do it.
Yeah,
But it's like, no, you have to have the humility to say the people can handle this. Like,
yeah.
give it to them. Um, and the people will figure out how to make the connections that I'm struggling with because I can't really talk to the other side right now because I'm frustrated and sad. Like, but the people will figure it out.
Isn't that beautiful? You
Mm.
actually don't have to figure it out.
No,
We have to
we don't.
we just have to allow and trust, which sounds kind of condescending, like who are we to be allowing and trusting, right? But that's what one has to do, you
No,
know.
that's what we have to do.
And the thing another thing I thought about though is one way to deal in my personal work, one of the ways that I've dealt with tough contradictions is questions.
Mm.
Instead of making statements, I've
Mm.
asked questions lyrically. And I'm wondering if that would be a
Oh,
useful tool.
I love that. One of the prompts could be, what are the questions that you could put in a song that would make people think about Oregon or their place in this place in this space. I love the prompt of questions. That's killer because
Yeah.
then it's a very interactive.
And my brain is so political.
Mm.
I think for this project, the more depoliticized the approach can be, while still aware,
But yes,
we're not trying to exclude anybody.
right.
But that, I think for this project, that might be helpful because as long as people are feeling supported and speaking whatever their authenticness is, and then we draw from that.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a good. It's fascinating to even think about this stuff.
Isn't it?
Because so what would you call the genre that song is in currently?
I think anthem.
Okay, anthem.
Right? I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. Is that
Well,
even a genre?
I don't ride around listening to that shit, and I don't know who does. So it begs the question of like, how do you do you do it in that genre, or what do you do? Like,
why didn't you listen to Hot 100 anthems from last year? That thing is sick, dude.
okay,
March is it's on 1 and 3 all day, baby. It's amazing. It's so good. March on. Well, dude, this is great, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, it's good to kick it. Whenever we see each other in public, we're so busy. We only get literally like the small talk in, and then we're
yeah. But how are your ladies, man? How's the family? All right, man. Enjoy the coconut water. I don't know if that's what you're drinking out there, but I hope it is. I bet it's good.
Yeah. All right, brother.
Right on, buddy. Take care, Mike. Later.